Hello, welcome back. Today we are going to talk about all of the books that I read in August. So I'm a little late getting this out. I'm filming this on September 12th, but that is because I was on a cruise for the first 9 days of September. Wasn't able to get my August wrap up done before that because honestly I was reading my August books up until the very last second. So I only read 7 books in August because I have a 6-month-old puppy in the house that I'm trying to take care of that takes a lot of my time when I'm at home. Work was absolutely crazy in August, and in addition to that, my dad also had hip replacement surgery, so I spent a week at his house helping him recover from that. So all of that kind of affected my reading a little bit, but also I didn't read a whole lot of great books. I kind of have all different types of books on this list, and I do have 2 books that I gave 5 stars, so it wasn't a total loss of a month, but I did also have quite a few 2 stars as well. So let's start with the 2-star books that I read. The first being The Book of Two Ways by Jodi Picoult, and I've had this sitting on my shelf for a while now. I bought it with trade credit at McKay's Books for $5, so I didn't actually pay any money for it, and I'm glad. I love Jodi Picoult. Jodi is my girl, if you know. I have a Jodi Picoult ranking video. I will link that for you so you can see all of my favorite Jodi Picoult books, but this is not one of them. And I knew I wasn't gonna love it, but I wanted to read it anyway because it's Jodi, and I thought maybe she would surprise me. But if you haven't read a Jodi Picoult book, they are very dense in whatever the subject matter is. She does a lot of research into whatever the subject matter is, and usually she does a good job of making it not super detail heavy, not super bogged down with whatever the thing is that she's talking about, but this didn't really do that. This was very info dumpy. And it's about like Egyptian hieroglyphics and mummies and stuff like that. So not really something that I'm interested in or have ever really studied outside of just like with basic history. But essentially you're following Dawn, and she is on a plane at the beginning of the book and it crashes and she actually survives. And they say, you know, okay, you survived, you're good to go. We will send you anywhere you need to go. Which to me seems very odd because you just almost died in a plane crash, and then the airline is like, oh, get back on a plane and we'll send you anywhere. So it's kind of strange because there's 2 different timelines and you're not sure how the 2 timelines intersect or if they intersect. And for a while I thought it was kind of one of those like alternate reality things, but then it ended up doing something different. But essentially she is married in her life before the plane crash, and she has a daughter, and her marriage is a little bit rocky, but honestly the reason it's rocky is like kind of stupid, and it's a little bit ridiculous that Dawn treated her husband the way she did. Dawn isn't a great person, she's not a great character, but she also has Wyatt, who's this ex-boyfriend that she had in college when she was studying archaeology and Egyptian hieroglyphics and mummies and things like that. And so you have that timeline of her in college, you have the timeline of her with her husband and her daughter, and then you have this timeline after the crash, and you're not really sure how the 3 converge or what's happening. And it had a trope in it that I really don't like in my romance books, and it did it in this as well. And so this just really didn't work for me. It was boring, it was info dumpy, I didn't like the characters, I was just shaking my head at all the decisions that they were making, and they just seemed immature, and I don't know. And they're also, it focused a lot on the daughter's weight, and I just felt like it was kind of unnecessary. Like I get it that the daughter is self-conscious because she's heavy, but like, did we need to focus on it that heavily? I don't know, I just felt like it was a little bit unnecessary. So yeah, overall, I wouldn't recommend this. There's so many great Jodi Picoult books that I would recommend over this one. The next 2-star book I have already unhauled from my collection, and it was 0 Days by Ruth Ware. I was so excited about this one because I love Ruth Ware. I've given so many of her books really high ratings, and I really like her mysteries and the way she crafts stories, but this one was just not it. It's about a couple who are pen testers, and essentially what they do is they are hired by companies to try to break into their like security things. So they're supposed to try and breach their security both physically and digitally to see basically how good the security is. And so they pay them to do that. So she's on a job trying to get into this company's security, and she gets arrested. Something goes wrong, she gets arrested. By the time she gets home, her husband is dead. And that's not a spoiler, that's in the synopsis. So the whole rest of the time, you're trying to figure out who killed her husband and why. but it was so obvious from like page 7, so obvious. And I kept shaking my head thinking, surely it will be something else. Surely Ruth Ware has something to pull out from this that I didn't see coming. And no, it was boring. It was basically just her running around trying to stay hidden from the police while figuring out what happened to her husband when it was literally staring her right in the face. And yeah, I just did not enjoy this one. It took me a long time to read, and I kind of wish I didn't finish it, but I wanted to because I was so sure that Ruth Ware would pull out something great at the end that I just wasn't ready for and didn't see coming. But yeah, that didn't happen. So there's so many other great Ruth Ware books. The It Girl was wonderful. The Turn of the Key is wonderful. The Death of Mrs. Westaway. Those are all really great Ruth Ware books. So pick up those instead of this one. And then my last 2-star is one that I don't even want to have to talk about, and it's A Welcome Reunion by Lucinda Berry. If you didn't know, Lucinda Berry is one of my favorite authors. I adore her. I've read all of her books, and A Welcome Reunion is a novella that is a follow-up story to The Perfect Child. And The Perfect Child isn't my like all-time favorite Lucinda Berry book. It's like kind of in the middle. I also have a Lucinda Berry ranking video. I can link that if you're interested on which ones are my favorite and kind of where I rank her books. I've enjoyed all of them up until this one. So A Welcome Reunion follows Janie, and Janie has recently gotten out of a psychiatric residential treatment facility, and she's been in a lot of different types of facilities and foster care and things like that, and now she is aged out and she is supposedly rehabilitated and able to live in the world freely. And so her former foster parents, who we met in The Perfect Child, are worried that she is out again because of all of the things that happened to them. And so that's all I'm gonna say about it because it's short. But I feel like a lot of people, and this is gonna be an unpopular opinion, but a lot of people wanted a Perfect Child continuation. They weren't satisfied with the ending. Personally, I loved the ending. I was so perfectly satisfied with it. And I know that's an unpopular opinion, and I don't want to say why I was okay with it because that would be a spoiler. But if you're interested, definitely send me a DM like on Instagram and I'd be happy to discuss it with you. But I had a lot of people message me when I told people I was reading this, and they were like, I just have to talk to somebody about this book. And it seems like a lot of people had the same feelings that I did, and it kind of feels like, you know, when an author has a book that's really does well, and then people are like, I love these characters, I want to visit them again, and so they think they want more of the story, but then they don't actually want more of the story, or they get it and they're like, this is not what we wanted. And so, you know, people are like, oh, well, we asked for this, but like, no, I did not ask for this. But I read it because it's Lucinda Berry and I love her. But yeah, this was just not, it was just kind of ridiculous and didn't give any more closure than the last one did, which I don't know that closure was Lucinda Berry's intent behind it, but I don't know. I just felt like it went against a lot of things that Lucinda Berry typically pushes in her books and typically has as like platforms. So I don't know. I just feel like this one was kind of a cop-out and kind of just done for people that wanted more of the story maybe. Oh, I hate saying that because I love Lucinda Berry so much, but this was just not it. But you know, not every book by every author is going to be a hit. So this one was not, but I am really excited for her book that's coming out in November. I think it's called Keep Your Friends Close. And that one does seem really promising. So of course I will continue to read Lucinda Berry's books, but this novella was just not it. Okay, let's move on to the 2 3-star books that I read this month. First of these is A Twisted Love Story by Samantha Downing. I, again, have already unhauled my copy. I gave it to somebody who was interested in reading it, but this basically follows a couple and they are in a super toxic relationship. They have been on again, off again for years since college, and now they're in corporate and they're still on again, off again, playing mind games, playing tricks. And now there is a detective that's involved trying to figure out what this relationship truly is, and there's a secretary involved trying to figure out what this relationship truly is, and that is really the whole plot. Like, that's really it. It very much is a character study, and I read this because of the Sleep When I'm Dead book club. It was the pick for this month. Sleep When I'm Dead book club is hosted by my friend Jessie from the channel Reading with Jess, and she was joined this month by Rachel by Happy Go Lovely Sleeves, and they were also joined on their live show by Samantha Downing, which was super cool. So I will link that live show down below, so definitely go watch that if you're interested in hearing about Samantha Downing's kind of thoughts on the book and her intent. And after reading it and hearing what she says, I do definitely see a lot of the things that she was saying. I just don't know that this was a favorite to me. I just kind of was rolling my eyes at the overly toxic nature of the relationship, and I just didn't feel like it was super realistic after a while. It also didn't really hold my attention, and it had some kind of throwaway characters that I felt like weren't really necessary. So now I only have one more Samantha Downing book to read, and that's He Started It, and I have high hopes for that one. But this one was just okay. I've already forgotten a lot of details about it, but I definitely feel like if you like that toxic relationship, or if you like character studies, or if you're just okay with the ridiculousness of a fun ride of almost like a Bonnie and Clyde type of relationship, then definitely check it out. And then the other 3-star book that I read was Blood Sisters by Jane Corey, and I read this for the back to school readathon. This covered, I believe, 3 of the prompts, and then I also watched a movie which was for another prompt, so I did finish 4 of the prompts, and I did a couple of the Instagram prompts as well. So I was able to participate as much as I could while packing for a cruise, but I just love this cover, and it has fall vibes, and I picked it for Dark Academia. It didn't end up being super dark academia, but whatever, we're counting it. This is about Allison, and she takes a job as an art teacher in a jail. And then you also have the perspective of her sister Kitty, who lives in a psychiatric residential treatment facility and is unable to speak anymore. So she uses pictures and pointing and an assistive communication device to communicate now because of this accident that occurred while she was with Allison going to school one day, I believe. And we don't get a lot of information on that accident and what happened and why, but all we know is that Allison feels like it's her fault, and Kitty was left with a lot of physical impairments as well as cognitive impairments. And probably the coolest thing about this book was getting Kitty's perspective. Being unable to communicate verbally and having to use these other communication modes, and hearing her thoughts and what she's trying to communicate, but then also getting the perspective of the person who she's trying to communicate with, who's not always understanding what she's saying. And Kitty is snarky and she's sassy, and the things that come out of her mouth are just hilarious. And I really appreciated that because I feel like a lot of times we don't get that perspective of somebody who doesn't have typical language and uses other modes of communication. And so that was very interesting, and I liked all of the discussion on ethics and caregivers and treatment and group homes, because that is the world that I work in. So those were things that I really liked about this book. The mystery was okay. And I didn't feel like there was a whole lot of a character arc with Allison. And I felt like there was certain things that could have been taken out of the story and it wouldn't have changed it. So I felt like it was like Jane Corey was doing a little bit too much with this. I felt like it could have been simpler and had the same effect. So I did give it 3 stars. I did enjoy it. I do like Jane Corey. She is coming out with another book this year, and I do plan on picking it up. So yeah, also that cover, I mean, come on. It's just so gorgeous. Okay, now let's move on to my 5-star books. I have 2 of them this month, which is so exciting. I feel like I haven't had a 5-star in a while. The first is Gone Tonight by Sarah Pekkanen, and this is a story about a mother and daughter relationship, and they have a lot of secrets from each other. This mother has not told her daughter much at all about her past, and this daughter is trying to figure out why and trying to figure out what it is that makes her seemingly normal mother so afraid of everything and have such mystery surrounding her. And it was so good. I just really liked everything that Sarah Pekkanen did, and I knew I liked Sarah Pekkanen with Greer Hendricks, but I didn't think I would like Sarah Pekkanen this much on her own. There was a lot of good discussion on aging and the strain that happens to a mother-daughter relationship as a mother ages, and as secrets come out, and as you start learning about one another, and as you become adults trying to interact. It was just, all of that was really good. And it was based in the DMV area, DMV meaning DC, Maryland, Virginia, that whole metropolitan area, we call it the DMV. And so it was set in the DMV, and so I knew a lot of the places they were talking about, a lot of the areas, a lot of the roads, so that was pretty cool. And I don't want to say too much about the plot because I went in not knowing anything, and I'm glad. So I say go in not really knowing what to expect, but there were times that it was pretty heart pumping. It was fast-paced. It was just really good. Is it anything crazy like you've never seen before? Probably not, but it was just a fun story that I just didn't want to put down. I read it in less than 24 hours. I also recommend this to any daughter who has ever lied to her mother about anything, because I feel like you'll relate to this a lot. Then my last book that I'm going to talk about that I read in August, and it was also my favorite, it was 5 stars, and it was Only the Beautiful by Susan Meisner. And I just learned about this book recently because I attended the Book Besties reading retreat about 2 months ago, and there was a part of the virtual reading retreat where people were able to give a recommendation of their favorite book or a book they think everyone should read, and this was one of them. So if you're the person that recommended that to me, thank you so much. It was such a great book. This is the closest thing I have found that gives me the same feelings I read when I read The Lost Girls of Willowbrook. So this is about a girl who grew up in a vineyard, and she grew up because her parents worked for the vineyard. So she grew up on the grounds of the vineyard working for them. And then her parents died. So she was taken in by the winemakers and the family, the wealthy family that ran the vineyard, to be their housekeeper. That way she, as a teenager, would have a place to go. She would be able to stay where she lived, and she would have a guardian. Well, then she gets pregnant. So she gets sent away to what she thinks is a home for girls, wayward girls, pregnant women, whatever. But it actually ends up being an asylum. And as soon as this book was pitched to me and I heard the word asylum, I ran to Goodreads and added it. And I found it on whatever apps I could as quickly as I could. And as soon as it came in from the library on the Libby app, I ran to listen to it. The other neat aspect of this book is that the reason this girl was sent to an asylum instead of a wayward girl's home is because she has a unique ability where she sees colors when she hears sounds. So every sound that she hears has a color associated with it. And there's a name for it. I can't think of it off the top of my head. I will put it on the screen, but I've never seen representation of this before in books, and I thought it was such an interesting thing to portray in a book, and especially being in the early 1900s when this took place, there was not a whole lot of discussion about things like that. Her parents told her, don't tell anybody that you do this, they'll think you're weird, they'll send you away. And so she was supposed to keep it very hush-hush. And of course, at that time, things like that were considered deviant. And so doctors didn't understand it, psychiatrists didn't understand it. She was put through electroshock therapy. She was put through all these different types of therapies to try and cure her from this disease, this mental health disease. That's not really a mental health disease at all. It just wasn't understood. And so you have that aspect. You also have letters that she's writing to her friend. You have multiple timelines. You have a little bit of a love interest there. And if you like The Sound of Music, you will also love this because there's a point of view of a woman living in Austria as a nanny. And she ends up being part of this underground group that smuggles children with disabilities out of the country so that they can't be found by the Germans and taken and euthanized. So this also focuses on euthanasia of the elderly and the disabled, and it was just so good. It covered a lot in just, 400 or so pages, but it definitely was worth it. I felt like I had answers at the end. I felt like I learned a lot. I felt like I became so attached to the characters. There was characters that you loved, characters that you hated, characters that you despised, characters that you just wanted to keep reading about. It was just really good. This is the only thing that I've read from Susan Meisner, but I'm definitely going to look into more. And if you like asylum books, if you like historical fiction, if you like Sound of Music, if you like wine, because there was a lot of discussion about wine in here too, then I think you should definitely try this book. It's a good one. Okay, those are all 7 books that I read in August. Let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. Or have I convinced you to pick up any book or convinced you not to pick up any book? Thank you so much for watching. Please hit that subscribe button. It really helps out my channel, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.